Welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy and the Postpartum Resource Center of New York. My name is Bridget Walsh, Senior Policy Analyst at the Schuyler Center. We will begin in just a few moments, but in the meantime, in order to get to know our audience a little better, you will see two poll questions appear in just a moment. And please note that these are optional and that if you do decide to participate in any poll questions today, your answers are anonymous. The results of the poll will be shared during the webinar today.
Hi guys, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the poll up for about 1 minute so I can make sure we get a few responses here. Great, I'm going to leave it up for about 10 more seconds. We've got a lot of people coming in. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for completing the poll. I'm going to go ahead and share the results now and leave them up for about half a minute just so everyone can get an idea of what we look like today. All right, great. Thank you.
Welcome to today's webinar. Again, I'm Bridget Walsh, Senior Policy Analyst at the Schuyler Center. We are excited to offer this presentation in the MomD webinar series in collaboration with the Postpartum Resource Center of New York. The Schuyler Center is a statewide nonpartisan advocacy organization primarily focused on improving policies for those living in poverty, particularly children and families. The MomD, or Moving on Maternal Depression work, is part of our continuing effort to connect and improve care and resources for pregnant and parenting women and their children. The Moving on Maternal Depression was part of a national learning collaborative to advance policies that improve prevention, screening, and treatment with an emphasis on racial equity and culturally relevant practices in policy and systems management. Here in New York, we are expanding the focus to include maternal mental health more broadly. While the national project has wrapped up, we hope to develop a state-level learning collaborative that can share best practices and information on maternal mental health issues here in New York. One of the projects for the MomD initiative is this webinar series. So at this time, I would like to introduce our intern, Brittany Eskew, and she will be available in the chat for any technical questions you have. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sonia Murdoch from the Postpartum Resource Center, who will introduce the center and our speakers for today.
Hi, thank you, Bridget, and thank you to the Schuyler Center and everybody for being with us here today. I'm Sonia Murdoch, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Postpartum Resource Center of New York. We are a statewide nonprofit organization helping New York State parents to be moms, dads, and families get to the help they need for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. We've been helping New York State families since 1998 get to the help they need. Our statewide toll-free helpline is available 7 days a week with additional support from Moms on Call and family telephone support. Online, we offer a free statewide PMAT resource directory. We also offer education on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders through our training institute, including our Circle of Caring support group program, and various initiatives such as our Vision Project 62, the Lisa Mary Riley Visioning Educational Series, and Take Care of You. If you have any questions regarding any of these programs and services, feel free to let me know at the end of the presentation today. I also want to mention to everyone that today's webinar is approved for one continuing education unit for New York State licensed social workers and New York State licensed mental health counselors at the cost of $15. Helping Hand Psychotherapy is recognized by the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work as an approved provider of continuing education for licensed social workers, and by the State Board of Mental Health Practitioners as an approved provider of continuing education for licensed mental health counselors. At this time, Brittany will be posting in the chat for anybody who would like to take part in the CE unit information for the link to Helping Hands. And also a reminder, you must attend the complete time in the webinar to be eligible to receive the CE unit. So before we introduce our speakers, we would like to ask 2 more poll questions. And remember that these are optional and anonymous questions. The answers to these questions will be displayed again for the audience to see who is attending today. So thank you for answering them if you choose to.
Great, thank you, Sonia. I'm going to go ahead and leave the poll up for, again, probably right about a minute, and then I'll share it for about a half a minute afterwards.
Thanks, Brittany.
Okay, great. Thank you guys for answering so quickly. I'm going to go ahead and share those results now for everyone to kind of get an idea. And I'll leave them up for just a few more seconds. Great, thank you. Back to you, Sonia. Looks like maybe Sonia's having just some technical difficulties. Sit tight for just 1 second.
Brittany. This is Bridget.
Hi.
Since we lost Sonia and I don't have the introductions, maybe we can just start with our speakers, and when Sonia comes back, we can get into the introductions. Does that work for our speakers? You ready to start?
Great. Yeah, let's actually go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the PowerPoint today. So sit tight just 1 second.
Actually, Brittany, I'm back.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, great. Let me get back over here then.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I don't know if it's the weather. Okay. So I'd like to formally introduce our speakers here today. Thanks for everybody's patience too. Okay. So it's for this important topic of Black moms, breastfeeding support, and maternal mental health, we are very excited to have 3 special speakers for our webinar today. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you our first presenter, Chanelle Jones. Chanelle is the founder of Chanelle's Comforting Doula Care. Chanelle is a single mom and looks forward to opportunities to share her experiences in ways that make a difference in the lives of those around her. As the founder of Chanelle's Comforting Doula Care, Chanelle provides birthing and labor support and childbirth education services. She received her doula certification through LIDA, the Long Island Doula Association, and participates in the organization's Black Maternity Wellness Collective and their Community Support Fund. She volunteers as an advocate for the Postpartum Resource Center of New York and participates in the Moving on Maternal Depression Project Mom D New York Voices Work Group. Additionally, she is a steering committee volunteer for Be Free, which is the breastfeeding, resiliency, engagement, and empowerment initiative with Northwell Health. Our second presenter that we are honored to welcome this morning is Janet Rickett-Simon. She is the founder of Just Right Lactation. Janet Rickett-Simon's personal experience as a breastfeeding mom and a WIC recipient led her to the opportunity to become a WIC breastfeeding peer supporter. Then Janet became, and for over 10 years now, she has worked as a certified lactation counselor and has since been a La Leche leader for 4 years, and she co-facilitates a breastfeeding support group. She is a WIC breastfeeding peer counselor in Hempstead, New York. Our final presenter is Janice Campbell. Janice is the coordinator of the Parent-Child Education Lactation Resource Center at Mount Sinai, South Nassau in Oceanside, New York, and we're very appreciative for her being with us today. Janice Campbell is a master's prepared registered nurse, Lamaze childbirth educator, and an international board certified lactation consultant. She's also the founder of Birth Spirituality and Lactation Time, where she engages with women to activate their maternal essence, to prepare them for natural childbirth, and to help new mothers to breastfeed with confidence and success. She has served many birthing families from different cultures and countries for over 18 years. Janice is passionate about providing evidence-based, family-centered, personalized care to women throughout their pregnancies, birth, and early parenting. She is involved in the leadership of We Breastfeed, which is the Black Breastfeeding Coalition of New York, a soon-to-be new nonprofit. So welcome to all of our presenters, and I'd like to invite Chanelle now to start us off today. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. Next slide. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a single parent household. I'm the youngest of 5, and my mother had 5 children by the time she was 18. So with a 7th grade education and $11, we moved from Kansas to New York because they had the best public schools at the time, around the age of 5. So I've been here for some time, but I look to my mom because eventually she got her GED and started out as a home health aide, and now she is a RN, currently working on her nurse practitioner license. She's a homeowner and she's happily married. So you can see I've clearly had a really great role model from the start. So next slide, please. A little bit about my birthing experience. So I had my daughter my junior year of college. It was an unplanned pregnancy. I had little to no support since it was just me by the time I went to school. All my family had moved away. But despite all of this, I was very optimistic about my circumstances and just making the most of it and being very proactive about being a mom and a student. Overall, I had a very healthy pregnancy, even though I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was already in my second trimester. Very interesting. I was 13 weeks by the time I found out I was pregnant. And so it was very interesting being pregnant and a student. Obviously, it came with its challenges as far as financially. I received like services from the Department of Health, from the local county, and obviously being pregnant, going to school full time and working full time was challenging enough. But I was able to have a healthy pregnancy. I did yoga, I walked a lot, I swam a lot. I enjoyed, getting extra meals on the side in the cafeteria when you're like, I'm eating for two, they scoop a little more on your plate. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. But eventually I did carry 2 weeks over. And I went to my OB and, I was planned to get induced. But the day before my induction was planned, I actually ended up going into labor on my own. Unfortunately, the events leading up to the act of labor was like an argument and like loud noises. And then next thing you know, my stomach hurt. I went to lay down and my water broke. So, I was in an unhealthy relationship at the time. So that kind of played its role into everything that happened leading up to my laboring experience. But basically, I lived on campus, so once my water broke, I waited a little while, and then I walked across to the hospital. And so when I got to the hospital, I was informed that there was meconium in my amniotic fluid. And so right away, they were like, okay, we're going to monitor you. You get the monitor on the outside and inside. And so I spent the next 24 hours on my back with no medication, of course. And it was lovely. I'm lying. It wasn't lovely. It hurt. It was very uncomfortable. And I kind of felt like I didn't have a voice because I knew that I knew my body in the sense that I just knew if I repositioned certain things, we can get things moving, but that didn't happen. So 24 hours go by and I end up with an emergency C-section and I get my beautiful daughter from it. So I thank God for that. I was very avid about breastfeeding. I was like, nobody's going to put any, anything, no binkies, no bottles, no nothing. So I insisted that after my C-section, they pulled me off to the side. I wouldn't even let them take me to the recovery room. And I told them to bring my baby to me so that I could breastfeed her, because that was like my number one thing, was to latch and have that bond. And she did. She just, hungry little girl, she just latched perfectly right from the start. And she fed, and I just felt like everything was right with the world. And so 3 days go by. You can go to the next slide. 3 days go by, and we get sent home. This was our just got home with baby picture. And so the 3 days that I was in the hospital, though, before I was discharged, I kept playing with the temperature. So nobody really noticed. And I believe I was let go with like a low-grade fever. And I was let go about 3 hours before like the official 3-day mark that you're supposed to wait. And so because of that, I ended up back in the hospital 3 hours later with 103.5 degree fever. It turns out I was septic due to the meconium in the C-section, and I also had a double lung infection of pneumonia from like lying in the bed for hours. And so unfortunately, she was born in the summer, which is big for babies, so I couldn't be readmitted back to the maternity floor with my daughter. So it was really hard. I had to find someone to come get her because unfortunately, due to my unhealthy relationship with the father, I couldn't call on him. And so I almost died that night. It was very scary. They didn't think I was going to make it. And then after that, when I did pull through the next day, and thank God my mom came to take care of my daughter, she drove through the night because that's the kind of person she is, and a flat tire. So thanks, Mom. And so the next day, they admitted me to like a sick kids floor, which you can't have a healthy baby on a sick kids floor. So I actually was separated from my daughter for the time that I was in the hospital for those 3 or 4 days. But unfortunately, I developed white coat syndrome, which is when you like have a fear of like doctors after a traumatic experience. Literally, it was just the white coat. Like I'd have to ask them to take their coats off before they enter the room. It was pretty, it was a lot to go through. And because I was separated from my daughter, my milk came in like right away, and I had to throw away healthy, like I was pumping out like 8 ounces per breast. I mean, it was ridiculous. I had like really good supply coming in, and it was bloody because of all the knots that had built up in my breast. And like, it was just very traumatizing to say the least. And I actually had to advocate for myself because I knew that like my blood pressure was going up. And I told the doctors, I said, I have to go home or I'm going to die here. My blood pressure is only going to keep going up because I'm not home with my baby, and I just need to be home with my baby. And I'm glad that I spoke up for myself because I literally went home and like, so I have to tell a confession. I gained like 75 pounds during my pregnancy, but it was on purpose. My twin sister found out she was pregnant the same day as me, about an hour apart. And so I was in competition to see who could get the biggest. She won, by the way. She's got a tiny body. So all that weight gain for nothing. I'm just kidding. But I dropped it all. Like I went home that first week, I dropped 50 pounds. 2-3 weeks later, I dropped the whole 75 pounds. And like my blood pressure went down, and I'm so glad. But it was a struggle being home with my daughter because of the antibiotics I was on. I couldn't breastfeed. And so she already knew she wanted breast milk. So you can imagine those two weeks were very rough. She like cried and screamed. It was inconsolable for 2 weeks. And it was really hard because she would smell the breast milk on me. And like mentally, emotionally, I was just a hot mess at that point. And I kept struggling mental and emotionally because of like obviously being in an unhealthy relationship and dealing with that. Being split from the father after the birth, and not being able to breastfeed my daughter, and almost losing my milk supply, actually, because those 2 weeks, it was really stressful that my milk supply had like almost completely dried up. So I went from like 8 ounces to, I was lucky if I could get out 1.5 ounces. It was that dramatic. And I thank God for a friend I had who was a part of the Leche League, who like helped me and encouraged me to get the proper nutrition and the things that I needed in order to get my milk supply back up. But during that time, I really believe I suffered from like, depression and anxieties. I had intrusive thoughts, which turns out is my mom also had, intrusive thoughts, which I just found out after the first time I told this story. And it was really scary because you would go to these appointments and they would ask you like, oh, are you okay? And you would tell them like, yeah, but you would never dare tell them that you're having these thoughts or that you're crying all day, and that you're just in a really dark place. And so I say that to say, next slide, please, forget about that. So I say that to say that thank God for my daughter, because she really just pulled me, if it wasn't for her and focusing on the fact that I had this life, that she didn't ask to be here, and that I was just lucky to have her, that's what really pulled me through. I mean, despite the fact that this very cute face, was tongue-tied severely. And when I tell you, when I started breastfeeding her again, it was torture because I had to breastfeed through like bleeding breast, scabs, the bumps, like everything. And I was just determined to like breastfeed her and to keep pushing forward and to not give in to the gloom and doom that, surrounded me on a day-to-day basis. Like, it was just really hard to keep pushing forward. but I just knew that like being a mom was like the best gift you could ever possibly have. And I'm glad that like I was able to push through and not allow my depression and all the things that were going through my head to like keep me down. And next slide. I always say that my daughter is my saving grace. And I thank God for her every day because she really is a blessing, and I truly am grateful. And I know some people suffer in silence and they may not be able to pull themselves from a dark place. And I thank God every day that I was able to do so. And so because of her, next slide, please. I was able to finish my degree. I was able to, pursue additional studies, pursuing my master's. And because of my own experience is what inspired me to become a doula myself. A couple of years ago, I was presented the opportunity, and I'm so thankful for it. Because now I can help other moms in their birthing experience and try to give them something that I never had. And it's really a privilege to see them go through their journey, having the support that I wish I had, and giving them a sense of peace when they're going through the process, and encouraging my friends and family along the way, and supporting them through breastfeeding and their mental health and making sure they have the proper support. It's important. So that's my story. Thank you for having me. And next slide. Thank you.
Janet, if you can unmute yourself, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Janet Rickett-Simon. I am I'm a mum of 3 and I breastfed those exclusively, but really my story is that I got into the breastfeeding world kind of by accident, as in when I had my first son, I knew that I wanted to breastfeed, but I had no idea the benefits for him or myself. So I just figured out from what we were doing, from the information I got from the hospital and from my own experience, that breastfeeding was the easiest thing to do. It was the quickest way to soothe the baby. It made me feel better. It made him feel better. And it just worked. So the way I got into breastfeeding was that I was a WIC participant at the time, because I told my husband at the time that once we had the baby that I wasn't going to go back to work, so I was home. So at one of the WIC appointments, they had a breastfeeding class, and I was the only person that was putting their hand up. And shortly after the class, I was approached by the person who was doing the class, and they said that, you know about breastfeeding, would you mind sharing your experience with some mothers? And I was like, sure, fine, that'd be cool. I like talk about breastfeeding. And it took them 2 years to call me. By then I had another child, and I was almost finishing breastfeeding that child at about 18 months. And they told me to go to a meeting. I went to the meeting, and somebody asked me for a resume. I was like, a resume? Why would I need a resume? So they said, well, this is for a job. I said, this is a job? So I said, well, I didn't bring my resume. And they said, well, how long have you been breastfeeding? And I told them, I don't know. So I'm there on my fingers counting. I said, 6 years. And they said, oh, right there on the spot, you've got the job. And I said, I've got a job. I wasn't looking for a job. I was home with my babies. I was completely fine. But they said, I have a job. So I went to the trainings after that, and it's the best thing in the world to talk about breastfeeding with mums, and to see these mums, you know, from a place where they feel that they can't do something, to become champions of, you know, their own destiny. Because breastfeeding, can we go to the other slide, please? Next slide. Is so much more than, you know, a lot of people just think that we breastfeed for the baby, but in actual fact, it benefits both mother and the baby. For the babies, it releases their it lowers their stress level. So this is something that has a lifetime benefit. This is not just for the babies. This is for this person. All these benefits that these babies gain in those first 100 days of how you feed the baby really does determine their quality of life for the rest of their life. You know, how are you going to age? As you can see, it regulates baby's heartbeat, their breathing, digestion, their body temperature. It helps you feel secure. This person develops, you know, calmness towards life in general that is going to be taken through forever. The muscles that they use while they're nursing, it develops the coordination of the eyes from changing from side to side. It helps to open the palate so that when the teeth are coming in, they all come out in the correct place. There's less risk of having to have braces. And it builds the immunity. There's nothing else on planet Earth that can build a person's immunity like breast milk. Next slide, please. So here we are at the mother. It's better bonding with the baby. We all have that, but we know that there can be obstacles put in the way of mum and the baby bonding and getting that symbiotic relationship going the way it should be. It lowers the risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, also heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis. Like I said, so basically now from lots of studies, they're saying that women who breastfeed have a much better health outcome in old age. So you're not if you're breastfeeding in your 20s and your 30s, you're really not going to see the benefit for the mums until they are maybe in their 50s, 60s, once they've hit menopause and how you go through menopause. So, you know, it's, I guess in this society, it's a lot more of you do something, you want to see an immediate response. But for breastfeeding, this is something that builds, and it's a slow reward, but it's the best reward because you have time and you have good health, which is much more than any money can buy you. If the mother's supporting breastfeeding is going well, and the mother gets more rest, the whole family benefits from it. Next slide. So one of the things is that where do we get this support and what does it look like? There are lactation professionals, peer counselors, support groups, and family members. So family members, if your family member is not saying the same messages that you want to hear, then, you know, you don't have to have them there. You know, you find somebody that's on the same page as you, has the same goals as you, is there for you. So, you know, get the support in place while you're pregnant. That's what I always tell my mums, if I can get to them at that point. Because I started out in lactation, a lot of the times I'm seeing the mothers after they've had the baby. So I became a doula because I felt that I have to go back even further. I have to develop the relationship earlier so that I can have effect on breastfeeding. So that's how come I became a doula. The lactation professionals, we're here, we are around. Sometimes it's hard to find somebody who looks like you, but you know, you can call, there's so much information out there nowadays. You know, everybody has these smartphones. There are, you know, like the breastfeeding support groups, they're in WIC, they're in the hospitals. Next slide, please. So, the Leche group, and there are there's Cafe Mochas. There's, like I said, this information is online. Talk to other mothers. Hospitals do offer great support as well. Sometimes it can be a little biased because, you know, they do tend to push the formula, but, you know, usually, just like there's Janice, there are people in the hospital that will support you for your breastfeeding goals. They are definitely here. La Leche has, I guess, the image of being very white, but that is changing. There are people like me who are involved with La Leche and have been involved with La Leche for a while, and we're there and we volunteer our time, and we will help and support you to be successful in however you want to feed the baby. We do support breastfeeding, but we know that, you know, exclusively breastfeeding can be a challenge. Next slide. So with the breastfeeding, like I said, so this is something that does involve a commitment, does involve time, does involve the family. The family has to be there to support the mother. It doesn't matter how your family's made up, whatever partner you choose, whoever is there for you can help you, because sometimes it just takes a word like, Mom, you're doing a great job. Mom, can I get you a cup of tea? Simple things like this can make all the difference. But also, while you're pregnant too, we want these mothers to reach out and say, if I do have a problem, I can call A, I can call B, I can call C. There are people there who you put together as part of your family during that time, so that you can get the correct help if you are having issues with breastfeeding and anything else. So, you know, the mum's health is a priority too. If mother's not feeling well, if she feels that breastfeeding is overwhelming, then, you know, it is not the end of the world to say that for a couple of days we're going to supplement with formula. No, it's not ideal, but in terms of that, the best thing for the family, we have to look at the whole picture, what benefits everybody at the time. There are, I have personally experienced in the WIC clinics where I've been, and some of the clinicians have told the parents of Black families that if they do have a problem with breastfeeding, their solution is always 9 cans. So I, you know, always push for the people to educate yourself. There's information there. Find out what you need to get to where you want to be. Next slide, please. So once again, so talk to your providers, you know, and from when you're pregnant, you can ask them certain questions. They have information online nowadays to make it easy for the moms. So they even have like a cheat sheet. So you can rehearse certain questions about, you know, what are their C-section rates? How do they feel about the statistics of maternal death amongst Black mothers? You know, what protocols have they in place to make sure that these mothers feel safe and secure in their care? Because really and truly, we're in their hands. But at the same time, as mothers and families, we have to look after ourselves as well. Get the information, reach out. So it's important for healthcare professionals and families to be aware of the biases that they have themselves. But I feel that this heavy lifting of these biases has to come from the providers, because as Black people, it's not us who are doing this to ourselves. It is outside influences. So there's lots of training. You can ask your provider about if they've done any training, are they aware of this kind of thing? So, you know, if you're in a practice and you feel you don't feel comfortable asking, then maybe look around for another practice. You can always talk to other mothers. Next slide, please. This is something that I think is getting better within the people of color, because I know that my mother, who, bless her, she's in her 80s now, was one of those who said, I'm holding the baby too much, I'm spoiling the baby, you're always nursing. But that's the only way I could keep the baby quiet. So I nursed him a lot. He nursed until he was 3, but that's what we did. So there's still a lot of this thing of spoiling the baby, which I think goes throughout all cultures, but it's something that we have to change. Well, you know, we are the new generation coming, my children as well, that breastfeeding is normal. Breasts are something to be used, not something just for titillation. They multitask, they're great things. So, you know, if you see somebody nursing, breastfeeding, you don't have to like, whoa, big clap, but, you know, good thumbs up and great job and keep walking is something we can all do. The providers as well encourage these mothers. You know, there's the solution to a breastfeeding problem is not formula. Formula is not magic. It doesn't, it fills the baby. That's all it does. And we can do better. For the mothers who have to go back to work, I just came across a book called The Fifth Trimester, which I didn't even know there was something called that, but apparently there is, the fifth trimester. So this is for mothers who are going back to work. How do you juggle breastfeeding while you go back to work? So once again, this comes back to your support system, your work before you go to work. Speak to your supervisors. You know, what do they have in place to help you as a breastfeeding mother? Can you pump? Is it clean? Does it have a plug? Does it have a chair? All these things that we can actively do to make sure that when we do return back to work, you know, things are in place that we can make it easier for the mothers. Like I said, the stigma that surrounds breastfeeding in Black communities is another barrier, but I really do feel that's changing. Next slide, please. Breastfeeding, it's improving. The millennials are really getting it together because the information is out there. And I guess we are seeing that how we treat ourselves and how we treat our planet really does make a difference. So if you can do something small as not add in the waste from a formula can over and over and over again, that is your contribution to making the world and yourself better, making us better, because we have to do better. We can't continue the way that things have been going. Like I said, we're in the world of information. Information is out there. Sometimes it's difficult to find the correct information, but perseverance, and like I said, if we talk to one another, we can help a lot of mums get to where they want to be. I'm very happy. My telephone number's on Facebook as a La Leche leader. My information is out there too. In these COVID times, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm happy to text. I'm happy to FaceTime anybody, just so they know that there is help out there. And we are very motivated, very excited, and we, you know, that's what we want. We want to embrace, because we want to be part of your family too, to help mums to be where they want to be. And that's it for me, really. So thank you for listening to me and looking at my slides. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out.
That's great. So now it's my turn. So let me share my screen. And you ladies, please let me know if you can see my screen at this time.
That looks great. Thank you.
Oh, now I lose the meeting. I don't see. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can still see your screen.
Okay, because for some reason I am not seeing my screen. Something here. Okay, good. Now I can see both. Good. So I'm Janice Campbell, and I'm very happy with the opportunity of being here with you today. I'm very happy to be able to share a little bit what I've been doing in the lactation world. Here. So I think when we are talking about Black women and the lactation mothers in general, it's important for us to keep in mind how the disparities still affect the outcomes and how prevalent and significant this is in the United States of America. There is several case studies and also reports from the CDC and from the Department of Health that show us that there is a significant level of disparities. We know that we die more, unfortunately. Black women are 2 times more likely to suffer from severe maternal morbidity than white women. And that's a very sad reality. The World Health Organization in 2014 came out with this data that shows that from 1990s to 2013, the maternal mortality ratio increased from 12 to 28% in terms of maternal death for every 100,000 live births, which is very scary. The jump that we notice from 12 to 28%. So let's try narrow down a little bit more this conversation, focusing more on the breastfeeding and as a very important healthcare or health indicator for Black women. There is several studies and documents that shows the superiority of breastfeeding and breast milk for mothers, for babies, and for the society. I think Janet beautifully described the benefits of breastfeeding and why is it so important for us, especially not just for the baby, but for the women and for the society in general. I always tell the moms that when we walk away from nature, everybody loses, right? So once we stop breastfeeding and opt for formula, for example, not only the baby lose on that rich nutritional nutrients, but the mom's also health outcomes are different and the society outcomes are different. It's almost like walking in the same path of those people that are not so concerned about the global warming, for example. Breastfeeding is in the same level of concern that we should have to ensure a better life for human beings in this planet. So there is a special physiological window to establish a good breastfeeding initiation and also to optimize the milk supply and ultimately increase the duration and the chances of having a successful journey. So we know that the immediate postpartum period is the most important time for us to offer the greatest support for breastfeeding moms and really help them to establish a good milk supply from the get-go. But it is a very challenging to increase this initiation and duration of breastfeeding rates in America. We know that not all moms get the same kind of care from in this perinatal period, right? So there is differences in there in the way, in the amount of time that the healthcare professional stay at the bedside, the amount of information that is given to the moms during this period. And when we lose that special window, the immediate postpartum period, then it's very hard to continue supporting this mom once they're out in the community, especially when they go back to work. So what is the biggest challenges for us African-American women? Why we may not breastfeed our babies? I think one of the biggest things is the discouraging comments about breastfeeding that comes really from our family members, usually from maternal grandmothers. You know, there is this this big understanding that we don't breastfeed, we don't have to breastfeed, and that comes from the slave period. That's, you know, it's good for women now to be able to say, I don't have to do that. I'm a free woman. We don't breastfeed, we don't have to do that, right? So that is something very strongly being passed from generation to generation in some of African American women. Also, I noticed as a lactation nurse that some mothers, they decide between breastfeeding or not breastfeeding their babies late in their pregnancy. And when they do that, it's kind of confusing to be able to really stick with their plan, you know. And also we notice that the healthcare professionals, they have a very influential role when it comes to support this mom's decision. And what the doctors say, what the nurses say, and the lactation nurses say, that has a very big impact on the mom's decision. And we notice that also very often the presence of the healthcare professionals are not very significant, or is not very clearly supportive for African American women. Sometimes we delay our attention, sometimes we don't give them the attention that they need to really be successful as breastfeeding moms. So it is very important to somehow to change the mindset of healthcare professionals, for them to step on their importance of their role to really educate, support, encourage. And we know that a lot of breastfeeding moms, most of the time, what they need is a TLC, right? They need some encouragement. They need somebody to come and touch their shoulders and say, you're doing great. That's exactly how nature is meant to be, right? So there is a few moms that have significant challenges and limitations with breastfeeding. The majority of us just need emotional support and care. So I also notice, we all know that emotional and physical traumas that women may have suffered at young age, or during the pregnancy, or even during the labor and delivery, all this can impact in a very negative way the ability and desire of this mom to be a breastfeeding mom and to bond with their baby. So it's very important for us to care for our moms in a very holistic way, considering their history, considering their background, considering their desires, and what is the plan for that mom in terms of breastfeeding, and really be as supportive as possible. There is other ways to breastfeed the baby, or to provide the optimal human milk for a babe, which not necessarily includes to put the babe at the breast. We know that pumping and bottle feeding the baby is a very good option for a mom that, for example, had a history of sexual abuse or assault, or unfortunately, I had a opportunity of taking care of a mom who got stabbed on her breast once, and she just don't want to put the baby in the breast. And before trying to understand the reasons why that mom was being reluctant in breastfeeding the baby, people just label her like, oh, she doesn't want to breastfeed her baby, she doesn't want to put the baby in the breast. I don't think we should even give a pump to this mom, because she's not gonna, like, we have some pre-judgments, like we kind of label people without trying to understand their experience. And in this particular case, in this mom, when I tried to understand the reason why, when she confessed to me what happened to her, why she doesn't want to put the baby in the breast, the whole story changed. The whole lack of the whole different level of alternatives can be presented to that mom. And this mom was a great pump mom. Like, she really pumped beautifully, significant amount of breast milk, and she was able to successfully nurse her baby. So as a healthcare professional, we need to have an open mind to really care and try to understand what is behind each woman's situation. And there is a strong crescent breastfeeding movement all over the world. I think the women got the right message about breastfeeding, and the vast majority of women do want to breastfeed the babies. They want to be there for the babies, and they do want to provide milk for the babies. Here where I work, 95% of the moms initiate their breastfeeding. They start putting the baby at the breast right there in labor and delivery. Unfortunately, by the time they get discharged from the hospital, this number is much lower. And for African American women, we have to have a very special attention and be sure to stage them in the center of this breastfeeding movement. And this entails to initiate this whole conversation really when they are teenagers. So many women, especially Black women, do get pregnant very early in life. and they need to get this access to the right information, to the right support as early as possible, even before getting pregnant. If you want to normalize breastfeeding, if you want to make this as part of our life in the society, it is important to really engage young women in conversations and like that, to normalize and make sure that they understand how part of their cycle of life it is to nurse their babies once they get their babies. So I had the opportunity of learn from Dr. Kim Grantry more about the Black feminism theory in public health. And this helped us to understand different aspects of how the Black feminist theorist can affect breastfeeding in general. So in her original theory, she talks about the respect individuals' right and self-definition and self-valuation, controlling images. I think it's so, so important in everything that we do. Considering race, class, gender, what are the challenges that we face as Black women to be able to be successful breastfeeding moms? What is the unique experiences that we have that does not affect other women's in different ethnical groups, right? What is the matrix of domination? What is the structure and agencies? How is the reality, the roles, the relationships, and the risk taking in this scenario? Is there rigorous, well done researches, and how is the application of this evidence base that we have out there? How is the problem solution paradigm being addressed when it comes to breastfeeding in the African American community? And also how empowered, what is the level of activism and social justice that these moms are in this social context, right? How do we can clearly understand how moms are being how can I explain? How can be, I missed the word, but it's very important for us to really make sure that we understand all these different aspects and bring this into the breastfeeding context so we can better support our breastfeeding moms. So it's important for us to think about racism and not race when it comes to breastfeeding disparities, right? So when we think about empowerment and social justice to eliminate breastfeeding disparities, I also think about how the professional development of African American women in the lactation field is, right? So let's think about the importance of the representation, like Janet was mentioned in her presentation. Where are the Black African American or, lactation consents? It's hard to find someone that looks like us. And that makes a difference when you are at the bedside with the patient, or when you are in the support group, or when you are visiting a mom at home in a lactation home visit, for example. There is a different level of connection. And I remember that one day I went to African American mom to do a lactation visit to her, and she confessed to me that she was so happy when she found me, because all the lactation nurses that she called, they say that they don't serve her area, they don't go to her neighborhood, and she was, even though she could afford to have a lactation nurse visiting her in her house, not all lactation nurses were willing to go and serve that community. So to me, that was an eye-opening experience to learn that really there is moms out there looking for support, and sometimes they don't get the support because of the location where they are at, or even because of the color of their skin. So another conceptual framework is the life course theory that helps us to understand how health, disease, and disparities patterns among different populations happen over time. When we look to the lens of the life course theory and this conceptual framework, we can understand that early life exposures influences the future health outcomes. So breastfeeding can provide several benefits for infants and children, including nutritionally, immunologically, and emotionally, from both short and long term. So we know that what these babies get today from their moms, from the breast milk, will affect their lifelong experience, in terms of health and in terms of emotional and social experiences as well. So early programming components of the life course perspective suggest that early life exposures influences the future health outcomes. So the most we can offer, encourage, and support breastfeeding, the better is the outcomes from the society in general, not only for one particular group, but for all of us as human beings living in the same planet. So as healthcare professionals, it's important for us to have a greater knowledge of the complex experiences of breastfeeding among Black women, and how can we help to improve infant feeding disparities. There is evidence that suggests that breastfeeding difficulties can lead a mom to experience postpartum depression, and that's a very important and significant aspect. And that happens, I understand, because if most of us, we do want to breastfeed our babies, we understand the benefits, we understand the importance of breastfeeding our babies, but for some reason, we didn't get that beautiful support that we need in the beginning. And then once we go home, the whole snowball starts growing and the challenges increase. And yes, we will be more prone to have postpartum depression for that inability to be successful as breastfeeding moms. Also, when we don't breastfeed, and the women that don't have the opportunity to be successful as breastfeeding moms, but have the desire to do so, they also face more anxiety, and they usually tend to give up early, right? So they start weaning early, and very often before even going back to work, they are no longer breastfeeding their babies, and that's very sad, right? So it is important for the moms in general to be happy with the level of support that they are receiving, to have quality breastfeeding advice, right? To work with somebody that is aware of evidence-based and are teaching them with high level of quality and information. It's important also for us to consider the interpersonal interactions, right? The way we really put ourselves at the bedside or at the community with those moms, right? So with words of encouragement, have support and empathy, be respectful with their preferences and their knowledge, right? And also respect the decision to use formula if that's the wishes for the mom. It is also very, very important for us to have a timely and accessible breastfeeding support, right? So to promote and to protect breastfeeding, we need to support women in general, regardless their cultural background, the color of their skin. It is very important for us to be there when they need and promote breastfeeding, provide good information and support as well. How do we address that in the community in a very effective way? So here at the hospital, we do have lactation support at the bedside. We do have a beautiful representative number of African American lactation nurses. We have 3 Black IBCLCs in our staff, which is awesome. And we have, I believe, 5 white IBCLCs in our staff. So that gives us a beautiful balance and a great picture of our patients' needs, right? So we do offer support group for when the moms go home, but we noticed that for some reason, unfortunately, the groups also have a specific color. Like most of the moms that come and stick with the support group, they are white moms. And why is that, right? Why is the moms not really, the African American women are not taking advantage of the free support groups that are being offered out there? To try to understand a little bit more, we create the Black Breastfeeding Coalition of New York. And we are offering, this is a very, it's a brand new newborn baby for us, but we do offer virtual breastfeeding support groups every second and fourth Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. via Microsoft Teams. So it's a virtual group. The moms, they can do that from the comfort of their home. And we're happy to do that because sometimes transportation can be a limitation. A lot of the support groups, they happen in the morning time when African-American moms need to be at work. So we carefully thought about, let's do that at 6 p.m. That's the time that moms are getting home. They don't need to get the baby and go somewhere else. It's right there, it's virtual, it's available for them. This group is hosted for African-American IBCLCs, well-trained and passionate about breastfeeding support. But right now we're facing a challenging of accessing the moms. So we do have an Instagram page and we're trying to spread the word as much as possible, but we're not getting yet as much moms as we hope to help as this group grows and matures. So it's important for me to be here with you guys today, sharing this information and sharing the need of having more and more support for African American moms. And that's another way to support moms, is to referring them to support groups where they're going to find moms that look like them, and they're also going to find healthcare professionals that look like them and are willing to offer the support that they need. So this is my references for today. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you so much for this space and for the opportunity. Let me see now, how can I stop sharing the screen? Okay, stop. Good.
Well, thank you to Janice, Chanelle, and Janet for their wonderful presentations. And thank you so much for helping to connect the dots of Black moms, breastfeeding support, and maternal mental health. And you've really helped us to increase our knowledge today of why Black moms may not be breastfeeding, but also sharing about supports available to Black moms to promote breastfeeding as well as their good mental health. So before we move on then to our Q&A session, and we understand if some people may need to leave, but we'll be here until for about the next 20 minutes or so. And we want to ask one last question regarding the material of this webinar series. We want to use this webinar series as a way to bring together those interested in the field of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and to grow this network. So if there are some topics that you would like to see in our future webinar series, please feel free to add them to the chat right now, and or before logging off. So thank you. So moving on for our Q&A session, we want to make sure that everyone feels free. If you'd like to turn on your cameras right now and unmute yourselves, and we'd be happy to take questions right now. I'll start off with a question then. I have a question for Chanelle to begin with. So Chanelle, thanks so much first off for being so inspiring and with sharing your story. What I learned from you also is just so much perseverance. But through your story, is there any way that you can share with us that, because talking about further providing support, was there one particular time with your journey to motherhood that you would give a suggestion what could have further helped you with gaining support?
Yes, thank you, Sonia. I think that if I had like how they have prenatal support groups now, I think that would have helped me tremendously. Also, if if I had more education going into like what to really expect when expecting, as they say, like you read the books, but it's also good when now I do childbirth education, and I wish I had had a class or two of those. And I specifically remember being in the OBGYN office, like, why don't they have these classes anymore? I remember asking my OBGYN why they don't have those like prenatal classes anymore. And they're like, oh yeah, they've kind of just led that to like, it's not something that was common. You had to like seek it out on your own. And being a student with limited resources, it was kind of like, well, I know I can't afford that, So I think that if I had some type of prenatal support group, and if I had like childbirth education, it would have prepared me more to what to expect like during the actual labor and delivery process, or like hospital and everything like that, what to expect. So I think that would have definitely helped my experience to probably be a little different or a little better, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So again, everyone feel free if you would like to ask a question in the chat, or please unmute yourself at this time.
Hi, my name is Julie Smith. I'm from Nurse Family Partnership. My question is for Chanelle. I remember you saying that, you would go to your postpartum visits and they would ask you how you are, and you would say, okay, but then you'd be having these intrusive thoughts. I'm wondering, looking back, if you have to teach a few med students or, nurse med students about taking care of a woman after postpartum, how would you suggest that they rephrase that question so a woman would feel more comfortable about sharing, like, I am actually having a difficult time, or having these thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie, for your question. It's a conversation I've had before, like, well, what are the right questions? Because it's like you ask those questions, what is it, the PQ9 or PQ10, and like those questions are very like basic, but they don't really allow you to elaborate. And so my suggestion would be to ask, like, it's not just like to just be direct, like, have you been crying for no reason? Or what I like to do is I like to give examples. And so I'll usually start a conversation with one of my clients, like, I was talking to my sister the other day and she was just really upset. And I asked her, like, hey, is everything okay? And she said, no, it's not. And I think giving examples really helps. So I think like just saying like, oh, thank you for coming in for this appointment. I remember there was a time when, I first had a baby and I was like crying all the time. And I didn't realize that, like, hey, this has gone on for a little while. Maybe I should talk to someone about it, and be like, oh, has that happened to you? Are you feeling something similar like that? Because I find even being an advocate for the Postpartum Resource Center that sharing testimonies is a really good way to allow women to express how they're feeling. I recently suggested to one of my clients that her family was having a really hard time understanding maternal mental health and postpartum and all the PMADs. And I was like, what you should do? You should go on the website, find someone's testimony who's similar to what you're going through, and have them read it. and just have like an open discussion after, and then see if they see the similarities in what you're going through. And then you can discuss why mental health is so important. Because as you know, mental health in the Black community is a very big stigma to overcome. Reaching out for help and everything like that is something that you have to like really be passionate about and kind of have permission to like move forward. And it's not something that's very common to seek out. And so I made that suggestion to her, and she's like, oh, that's a great suggestion. So I think it's, even if it's not your own experience, maybe talking about an experience would allow, you know, room for her, like a mom, to say how she's truly feeling, or to say like, you know, what's really common, intrusive thoughts, you know. You wouldn't think it, but you know, I thought about putting my kid in the oven for no reason. You know, I would never harm my kid, but such a random thought to have, you know. But it's something that happens that we don't talk about. Has that ever happened to you? You know, like, you don't have to be afraid to talk about these things because it's pretty normal, you know. And just normalizing it and making it feel like it's okay. I don't have to worry about my kid being taken away, or, you know, calling the cops on me, that type of stuff. But I think a lot of the time it's just making room for those type of conversations, and just giving an example, something they can feed off of, kind of opens up dialogue, I find, a lot.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Yeah.
it was very helpful. Thank you.
And if I may, I just want to mention that also, as a healthcare professional, it's important to pay attention to our body language and really show interest on what that mom is about to answer back. So when we ask them, have you been crying lately? Have you feel like some tightening in your heart, like some sadness, whatever, like really look at that person in the eyes and really be interested in what they have to say. Because very often we kind of can feel that, oh, this healthcare professional, he's asking me something, but he doesn't really want to know the answer. You know, it's almost like saying, hi, how are you? And you just answer, hi, I'm fine, thank you. You know, so I think being interested on what the moms have to answer back to us, it's so important. Like, really strengthen the connection between the patients and the healthcare professionals.
Sarah, next question. Okay, I'll keep this going. I'd like to ask Janet, in regards to peer support and your experiences as a providing peer-to-peer support within the moms going to WIC, and even Chanelle touched on the stigma sometimes with breastfeeding, stigma with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So Janet, as we're wrapping up here, if you could share what you would think, again, the message we should all be leaving here today with in regards to connecting with peers.
Well, with the WIC participants, I guess that's who I work with the most. There are, I guess there's like a bias, because you're on WIC, you have to have a certain state of mind. So as a peer support as well, then even I have to be aware of my own biases as well. And to make sure that when I give the information, that I am trying to look at it from the mother's perspective as well. And I think one of the reasons is that I enjoy it, because that I've been where that mother has been. That first 3 months of learning how to breastfeed is not easy. And to let them know in terms of emotional support, that just as Janice was saying, that you have to be connected to that person. You have to try and understand that person, be aware of your biases, be aware that they may have biases, because a lot of people, you know, they walk in and they say that I am the breastfeeding professional, and there might be a white clerk sitting next to me, and they go over to the clerk, because they just always assume that if it comes to breastfeeding, it can't be somebody of color. So you know, you have to take that on and then be open so that they in turn can open towards you, and let them know, as Janice was saying, that, you know, emotionally, you know, these moms are very fragile. So we have to hold their hands, hold their heart, let them know that, you know, if they feel there's something that's beyond they feel they can cope with, that there is help out there. And WIC is a very great resource center. I refer a lot because a lot of the stuff that comes in is beyond my scope. I'm not even going to try and pretend that I can take on mental health, because I can't. I haven't been trained to do it, but I have experienced enough that if I see something, I can say, well, this isn't right, and I need the right words. So I need to put them in the right direction and give them the proper resources so these moms are looked after. Because mental health is, you can't function if, you know, your mental health isn't where it's supposed to be. It's as lactation professionals, we are all aware of these things. We are aware of them, and how we tackle them does make a difference to these mothers. But like with Janice, there are groups and support out there. So we just trying to get the word out there that mums, you know, you can do this, in terms of physically and emotionally, to look after yourself, to be a better person. You know, just to be a better person, a better parent, a better citizen in the planet. You know, a lot of the young people are very into how we look after the planet, what's going to happen. I watched a documentary with Sir David Attenborough the other day, saying that if we don't get our act together, we could be looking at the end of the world in 80 years, which is very scary. So, you know, I'm very, very hopeful. I'm very hopeful and excited that things are getting better. So I'm going to leave it on a positive note that, you know, like I said, the best is yet to come.
Thank you, Janet, and thanks for being positive. Janice, as we're wrapping up, I wanted to ask if you would share with the group here in regards to best practices, if there's something that you're thinking that within a health system, that looking again to close gaps here, and again, positive solutions. And if there's something that you'd want to, you know, further leave us with here.
I would say that we need to start as individuals to search the essences of being healthcare professionals. Why did we choose to be in that field? And once we understand your role, and when you bring up all the empathy and all your scientific knowledge on the field, we can collectively come up with solutions that are more efficient to help and support all sorts of patients, and especially the ones that suffer the greatest disparities in health outcomes. So I always think, like, it starts with each one of us to ask ourselves which kind of nurse I want to be, which kind of doctor I want to be, which kind of social worker or doula. You know, how do I treat each one of my patients as another fellow human being? So starts with individuals, and we bring that to our meetings and think collectively, you know, find our voices to advocate for those that are suffering the greatest. But I think more specifically in terms of postpartum depression and mood disorders, and also more specifically about breastfeeding, the support groups are great alternatives. And now in times of COVID, it's a good thing that we have the opportunity of having virtual meetings of that. We have more access to resources, and we can also have a more access to the patients as well. So people, although we are isolated in our homes, in our workplaces, we can at the same time access, I think, more women in general in our society.
Thank you. And I agree with you. From the Postpartum Resource Center of New York, there's so many virtual options right now, and wanting to make sure that these moms and families know that there is help out there. Very, very important. part. And also, as Janet mentioned, with the importance of getting trained in perinatal mood disorders, I do want to share the Resource Center does provide training opportunities, including specific training geared towards doula, for doulas to be trained. So, and are there any other questions here from today's attendees? Any other questions? And again, feel free to put any questions in the chat box or any suggestions for future topics that you'd like to see. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here today, and with much appreciation again to Chanelle, Janet, and Janice for their wonderful presentations. And we hope that each of you will continue on with us on our Moving on Maternal Depression webinar series. We're very happy to share with you and announce that our next topic is understanding maternal mental health and the impact on families. Our presenter next time will be on November 4th. Next week will be Vanessa McMullen, who is the clinical supervisor at the Marks Family Right from the Start 0 to 3 Center. And she is also the coordinator of their agency's Diane Goldberg Maternal Depression Program. So we hope that you'll continue on with us and register for next week. And thank you for everybody for being here with us today.